来てしまいました。ノノは絶対宇宙パイロットになるのだ。なぜならば。
Since Gunbuster 2's creation in 2003, there have been many zany, over-the-top action shows, but at the time I saw it, it left a big impression on me. To date, I have watched this OVA probably 6 times, more than I do for almost anything. In this video, I'm going to give a quick synopsis for those who haven't seen it, and then get into the main topic, which will be about the 2 main characters' growth. If you haven't seen it, don't watch past the synopsis, as the rest of the video will spoil everything. Gunbuster 2 has incredible animation and sound design, culminating in scenes that get your blood pumping, with characters shouting lines, attacks, or otherwise, dramatic clanks of metal or bassy thumps that show you the weight, both literally and figuratively, of the events transpiring on screen. It unleashes this sense of exhilaration that sweeps me up into it no matter how many times I see it. Of course, no show can survive only on spectacle, but the themes are presented so well in combination with it that the emotions inspired by it are intensely memorable. The story is very doomsday sci-fi with humanity threatened by an unknown force. However, that plot is almost just a backdrop to allow for the message or theme of the show, which, similar to the first Gunbuster, is that your wishes or goals can come true through your efforts and perseverance. Nono, one of the main characters, is a young girl leaving her home to pursue her dreams and adventures. She aims to become a space pilot, desiring to become like her mysterious idol, Nonoriri. Through some mishaps, she meets another young girl named Lulk, a play on the name of the bird, the lark. Lulk is a topless, a pilot with supernatural abilities that lets them control the famous Buster machines that defend humanity from the space monsters, a force of alien nature that threatens their very existence. She saves Nono from trouble and simultaneously gains her affection and adoration as a space pilot. Through the duration of the show, she follows Lulk around trying to learn from her so she too can become a space pilot. Nono is a very straightforward character, and as such characters often are, a bit dumb, you could say. But in another sense, she simply sees the bright side of things, the best in people, and is always desiring to help those she can. Lulk has the attitude of a bored honor student, unchallenged by her assignments but proud of her own skill. Their character types are pretty common in anime, but the emphasis is on the growth of their relationship as friends. You want to believe in the characters and their actions and quickly find yourself falling in love with them. As their relationship goes from fan and idol to friends, going through some rocky parts, you can't help but root for them and feel happy for them helping one another overcome their trials. Being a 6-episode OVA, the pacing is quick, with weeks or sometimes even months taking place between episodes, but they're tightly packed with content and no real fluff to speak of. Thankfully, even with that being the case, it doesn't feel rushed either. Being as short as it is, it does a great job introducing themes or details and later reintroducing them in a new light. What seems like minor character quirks can often turn out to be something bigger for that character, so it's definitely worth rewatching to catch those little things. It does it in quite humorous ways sometimes too. If you like giant robots or high-quality, beautiful action animation, you can definitely at least enjoy this show, but I think anyone that can get pumped up by friendship themes will be the ones that truly love this show. From here on out will be the analysis, so if you have not yet seen the show, stop the video here. What I just absolutely love about this series is the emotions it makes me feel. The camaraderie, the struggle to understand one another, the ups and downs of becoming equals in each other's eyes who can actually rely on one another. And going along with that, the way it's represented in the story through their battles, through the way things are animated. The scene where they reach that level of understanding is awesome. Up until then, they each have successes on their own or in assistance to the other, but it is always one relying on the other or one catching up to the other. And while those scenes are all awesome in their own ways and are absolutely important to their development as they show stages of their growth together, it isn't until that final scene that all of it comes together and their friendship reaches its full potential. The character designs for the two main characters especially stick out in my mind as being memorable. Nono is a tall, pink-haired robot girl with star-shaped pupils, hinting at her inhuman side, being a robot. The fact that she was created as part of the Earth Defense Forces so many thousands of years ago, as their symbol is a sort of star with a crescent behind it. And perhaps most importantly, showing that she is a starry-eyed sort of person with big dreams. Her lankiness and height is a rarity in lead female characters also. She stands a whole head higher than Lulk. I think this points to the revelation that Nono is actually a Buster machine herself, that she was designed to protect others and is a figure to be looked up to, like a child to their parent. Her height is exaggerated even further at the end when she feels she has to protect all of Earth and humanity on her own. There's also the scarf she wears when she's in battle mode from episode 4 through 6, but I'll talk about that more a bit later. In the case of Lulk, her name purposely sounds like a mispronounced lark. There are several references to the bird itself in Japanese. They talk about seeing larks on Earth using the word hibari. I was curious, so I looked up a few things about them in relation to Japanese culture, and I found a few things. First off, and probably the most obvious once you connect Lulk to lark, is her hairstyle, which is definitely very reminiscent of a bird. Second, the specific bird referred to with the Japanese actually has plumage that's the same color as Lulk. Dark brown and a very light tan, or as we'd call it as a hair color, blonde. Lastly, I found this poem. In the gentle light of the bright spring sun, a lark soars off, while I am heavy-hearted and aching, alone. This was a poem written by a Japanese poet in the 8th century to express his understanding of himself as an individual human apart from any other person. Now, this is just me extrapolating and hypothesizing, but I think there are certainly echoes of this in Lulk, as she is one of a rare breed, and not only that, but also the best at what she does, far separated from the regular people who idolize her. The poet's loneliness was one of realizing he is nobody, while her loneliness is one of being somebody, but with no one seeing her, nor her seeing anyone else as an equal. The opening narration of episode 1 basically says, saying that wishing upon a shooting star makes them come true is like saying they won't, because you don't know when one will happen. But my wish will come true, because I've been waiting for this one. Reaching your goals depends on you putting the effort forward to make it happen, and the perseverance to continue heading toward it regardless of how far away it is. At first, this idea is presented to you by the simple-minded Nono and seems to just be daydreaming, but as it goes on, you see that she really believes in hard work and guts, as she says, and follows through on it, which is at first in great contrast to Lulk, who sees it as useless if you're not already qualified or acknowledged. Next is a bar scene where we find Nono working part-time, but being the clumsy girl that she is, she randomly splits a plate clean in half, and has done the same to pans and a whole freaking fridge. What's interesting is this is never actually brought up again, pretty much, and at first seems like a very strange quirk to have. However, if you remember in the 4th episode, much like the plate, fridge, and apple, when she attacks the real space monster, she splits not only it, but the entire moon in half. While this makes for an amazing scene normally, once you realize that this is related to her quirk or skill of being able to split things, it actually also becomes quite funny, instead of just being notable because of the sheer ludicrousness of the situation. This is actually repeated again in the last episode, where Lulk and Nono's attack actually splits a black hole open. When they first meet, notice that Nono is looking up at Lulk from the ground in adoration. She immediately becomes a fan of hers and soon chases after her. The fourth episode again has an interesting contrast here where, after Nono saves everyone, she alights onto Deesnif's hand, who is crouched down, wounded, and Locke looks up at her in awe, but interestingly with what I feel is a bit of fear and or intimidation. Up until that point, she came to like Nono, but probably just viewed her as a friend to protect, not someone that would ever be able to protect her. Next is the topic of the twins and Tycho making predictions. Since the topless phenomenon happens in the forehead, I'm going to assume that it's related to the frontal area of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. Wikipedia has this to say about that. The most typical psychological term for functions carried out by the prefrontal cortex area is executive function. Executive function relates to abilities to differentiate among conflicting thoughts, determine good and bad, better and best, same and different, future consequences of current activities, working toward a defined goal, prediction of outcomes, expectation based on outcomes, and social control, or the ability to suppress urges that, if not suppressed, could lead to socially unacceptable outcomes. So I think simply being a topless grants a sort of precognition by strengthening a human's latent ability to make predictions of outcomes. It could be interesting also to consider that being topless may actually make those functions go out of control or something, rather than just calling it strengthening, when looking at the attitudes of both current and former topless, considering that the prefrontal cortex also relates to social control, or self-control, you might say. Nicola does say in episode 2 that being a topless means manifesting a heightened mental state, but it's pretty non-specific, and they certainly don't seem to have a full understanding of what that state is either. About the word topless itself, it's fairly obvious, but it's a double entendre referring to both being unrivaled or the best, and of course as a joke for Nono to misunderstand when she rips her shirt off. However, that latter point actually is more significant than just a joke, and this is made more obvious at the end of the show when Locke mimics the action in that specific context. In Japanese culture, public baths where people bathe together in the nude are seen as a potential place of bonding between friends for either gender. If you can feel comfortable to expose your external self to your friends, then you can feel comfortable bearing your internal self as well, or that's the idea at least. Nono bears all of herself to Locke very early on and wants to grow closer to her, but even though there's a bath scene where Locke is cleaning Nono, Locke never reciprocates this aside from a flashback and when she rips her shirt too, both in the final episode. There's a bit more to that, but I'll talk about it in more detail later. This is actually one of the reasons I'm kind of okay with some of the fan service in this OVA. Some of it does feel pretty unnecessary, but in the first, second, and sixth episodes especially, it has meaning in their relationship. What I like about episode 2 is it really illustrates how Locke and Nono's relationship starts out very clearly. Locke basically takes care of Nono, Nono calls her a hero of justice, and Locke totally lets it get to her head. This comes up again when she is summoned to the military ship and sees the other soldiers react to her presence and gets all haughty and proud. Even when they're under attack, the reason she wants to go out and fight is to play with Nicola. It's actually only until Nono once again brings up what a hero of justice should do that she decides to help the military forces in danger. What I like about it is that it shows that she knows Nono is right, that she should help them first. And even though she's not honest with herself about it, she does listen to her. And of course, even ends up asking Nono to help her save them. Also, since Nono can't actually pilot a Buster machine, I think what actually happens in this scene is that Locke simply gets encouragement from Nono helping her, and that alone allows her topless ability to become stronger in that moment. I think it's the same thing with the planet moving bit in episode 5. It might also be that Deesnif himself responded to her. I could imagine that as a Buster machine that came after her, even if he doesn't actively realize it, he sort of respects and gets encouraged by her himself. I'm bringing it up now, but this series pits childhood naivete and hope and adulthood knowledge and despair against each other the whole way through. In episode 3, we see a new Buster machine that actually comes in packaging, as if it's a toy. It's both funny and a really blatant way to underscore how people see the Buster machines and the topless themselves. Comparisons like this are in every episode, with the restaurant manager telling Nono to get serious and settle down in the first, the Space Force officer's attitude in the second, and so on. On that note, it's interesting that we get a quick hint of how Cassio thinks of himself in regards to this, because he says, "those adults," removing himself from that group of people. The reason for this is clearly explained in episode 4, so I won't bother going over that. As a counter to the notion of childhood versus adulthood, though, I love how Nono says Taiko isn't acting very adult-like when she refuses the children's request to make snowfall, on the grounds that it is, of course, unrealistic. But then I think that shows that in Nono's mind, an adult is someone that protects the dreams of children, not someone who crushes them under the pretext of being realistic. Taiko, angered at seeing aspects of her younger self in Nono, says that there's no way they could do it, but gives up before even trying anything. I mean, sure, snow couldn't form normally, but I could imagine that Nono might even make a snow-like confetti, or use an ice machine, or find some other kind of way to make them happy, even if just appealing to their imaginations. The point is in the not giving up before even trying to come up with a solution, even if the solution has to be non-standard. She brings up stopping crimes, wars, and especially sickness, thinking of a boy she liked when she was a child. And no, maybe powers alone wouldn't stop those things, but that doesn't mean you can't act to prevent them on a local person-to-person scale. You may not always succeed, but it's better than just giving up. Nothing will change if you don't change yourself. Lulk explains that Nono just wants to help people and keeps working hard to achieve that however she can. Confronted with that, Taiko can only sulk. When Nono confronts her directly, she says she feels that she lied to that boy, saying she'd heal him with her powers but was unable to. She's carried that guilt with her and it's made her bitter. Nono says that a Buster machine won't help someone who can't believe in themselves. That she really does want to help those children, doesn't she? Taiko finally throws away her guilt and admits to herself that she does just want and wanted to protect them. The Buster machine reacts to that and wakes up. Also, I love how this moment of personal and emotional triumph is interspersed with people explaining the science behind her new killer attack. It's hilarious, but at the same time, playing it straight with the scene almost makes it feel as if they're describing in numbers how intense of a personal victory it is. So intense she momentarily crosses time and gains a chance to have peace with herself. Episode 4 starts off with Lulk trying to keep up her cool image, denying that Nono's ever helped her, which she overhears. The fact that her friend can't even admit she values her hurts deeply. You can see Lulk immediately regret it. It hurts Nono enough that she loses confidence in herself and it shakes her personality, making her look for outside solutions which aren't going to help. You may say, well yeah, of course they wouldn't because she turns out to be a Buster machine. But that doesn't actually matter, as was illustrated in episode 2. Just her being around was enough to enable Lulk to reach new heights of power, which happens again in episode 5. The point is that looking for external solutions to interpersonal problems are not the answer. You have to examine yourself internally. It's worth noting that we're finally seeing Lulk's scarf for the first time since the first episode. Nono's kept it with her, but I think we only see it now, because now that she's feeling distant from her, she wears it to keep a piece of Lulk nearby. Once we see her with it on in this episode, it becomes a part of her design, and we never see her go into battle without it. The twins' desperation to revive the alien Buster machine stems from believing they can't remain as one without it and the topless ability. I believe that they feel that without it, they can't truly understand one another. As I previously hinted, they seem to be semi-psychic, so it's reasonable to think that as topless, maybe they can understand each other internally without even really trying. They think that they'll lose that if they lose their topless ability, and so are desperate to keep it no matter what. And of course, every other current and former topless we've gotten to know has felt the same, that once you lose that ability, everything changes. People either lie to themselves, or hold on to false hope, or say that it was just a childhood dream and nothing more. While, of course, they revived it to destroy what they thought were space monsters, I think this point is actually what they personally care about more. Continuing on that theme is Casio's monologue about Topless having nothing but the Buster machines, that it must have been the same for Nonoriri too. But Nono says he's wrong, remembering in a flashback that Lulk called her a friend. It doesn't have to be the way everyone thinks it is. And then in one of my favorite scenes, this gets me so freaking pumped up every time. Nono realizes her mistake and rushes with all of her strength to her friend's side. Distance no longer has any meaning to the bond we share, she says. Not just referring to her newfound ability to warp, but realizing that feeling distant in friendship is meaningless also. Instead of being worried about that feeling, you should just work to close the gap. Having a Buster machine or whatever other external tool doesn't matter, and people who keep dwelling on that will never be able to move on and grow, because you have the tools to do so within you. Nono has realized this, but Lulk looks at her in awe, not really understanding yet herself. Here in episode 5, if you didn't already figure it out, is when it's revealed that the Nonoriri that Nono idolizes is actually Noriko, the main character from the first Gunbuster. Nono visits Lulk and Taiko in the hospital, bringing some sweets to share with them. Lulk takes a wrapper from one of them and makes a paper crane. Nono is really enamored with it and asks what it's for. To which Taiko laughs and says, "On Earth, you're supposed to make them for someone to show them you hope they stay well." Basically, it's a Japanese cultural legend where if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, you'll be granted a wish or great luck. As such, it is often gifted to friends or family as a general good luck charm, or to someone who may be ill. This episode also shows that even with the new opinion that topless are worthless, it's not because of any realization of people's own selves, but because they have something to replace that position with, Nono. This, of course, affects the topless too. Nicola gets desperate, Lulk gets angry at Nono because he went to her and is feeling useless herself. Nono begins to feel uneasy and loses confidence both because of that and the adults who are depending on her far too much. For example, the Admiral looks up to Nono similarly to how she did to Lulk in the first episode, but Nono doesn't seem to be able to accept it. All of that is why she tells Lulk the story of the last bird on Mars. She feels that loneliness, similarly to Lulk did before they met. Lulk responds angrily, already feeling like she's being left behind, just like the pilot who scrawled that poem on Disnuf. The Admiral heaps praises on Nono, so far as to even call her a goddess, and Lulk just mutters number 7, unable to even call her by her name in her display of power. Neither Lulk nor anyone else can see her as a being with a personality at this point. They all get swept up in their own preconceived notions about her, creating a major amount of pressure on her that you can see on her face. Lulk falls on her knees in despair, thinking Nono was the one that was really important the whole time. But Nono tells her that she was always jealous of her, because Nonoriri was just a normal girl, just like Lulk is. She finally realizes that Nono wasn't what changed. It was she that just became filled with fear. Nono, who is so uncertain, feels confidence again, and Lulk, who is feeling useless, now sees that Nono wants her help. Empowered by this realization that even with all her power she still wants them to fight together, she performs a feat never heard of before, grasping a planetary core and throwing it like a baseball, using it as a weapon to smash into the space monster. However, even that is not enough to defeat it, and this shakes Nono. She was sure the one she idolized would be able to do it, but even that wasn't enough. Rather than let her die in some joint suicide mission, she decides in her fear to leave her and join with her Buster Legion, thinking it'll make her stronger, leaving Lulk and the rest of humanity behind despite just rejoining with her. This leaves Lulk understandably angry, disappointed, and confused. Despite everything Nono has said about hard work and guts, she ran away, And even Lulk was ready to die in a suicide attack, which is not at all what Nono wants. They've both let the size of the problem in front of them shake their own beliefs. At the beginning of episode 6, it's now been 6 months since Nono left and Lulk is visibly older. She dwells on memories with or of Nono throughout the episode and snaps at the guards for touching her hair as if not wanting anyone to disturb them. Mankind has decided to throw away its home for a chance at survival, with even the Council of Elders seeing it as a test for mankind to reach adulthood. Even though it seems like nobody wants it to be this way, they seem resigned to their fate and have given up hope of any other solution. But in order to stop them from using Earth as a weapon, Nonoli finally reappears. Lulk beats on her, saying this is mankind's battle, that she doesn't know or care if it's right or wrong, and that it has nothing to do with number 7 anymore. But all of that is just what she's told herself. What she's really thinking about is being left behind, left alone, when all she wanted was to be called by her own name, to be Nono's friend. And then Lulk loses her topless ability. At that point, Nono, having assimilated with her fleet, is taller than almost anything else in the show except the enemy. And as big as she is, this form still proves ineffective for protection, almost as if saying just pretending to be so big and important is powerless. An officer of Earth's forces is even heard to say, the enemy is just too huge. Nono fights the space monster, but is losing. Lulk, who has just lost her power as a topless, despairs, but she thinks about Nono's words. The person named Nonoriri wasn't special. She was just an ordinary girl. In danger, Nono, for the first time, finally calls out Lulk's name. She gets woken up by this and rushes to help her, to the true cockpit of Diznuf, its brain, as if she's going to become Diznuf's mind. Lulk arrives at the cockpit, resolves herself to commit, rips her shirt open, mimicking Nono in the first episode, with Diznuf following suit and ripping his chest armor open, reaches out, grabbing the engine, or heart you might say, of one of Nono's machines, taking in a piece of her, strengthening Diznuf literally and Lulk herself figuratively, allowing Diznuf's true form to be reached, synchronizing it with Lulk. At this point, she and it are essentially one. Before this, the only way you could see emotion in Diznuf was through his one eye, but now with his face mask removed, you can see his emotion that is completely synced with Lulk. What I love about this in relation to the childhood versus adulthood theme is that Lulk realizes that none of it matters. None of that is the point. What matters is the trying, the doing, and the continuing to do. She may have lost her special power when her childhood ended, but she realized that wasn't important, and rushed to help her friend in whatever way she could. She shows up in front of Nono, who, in this shot, has her face obscured, in contrast to how she is normally. It reinforces that she's hiding behind her insecurities or fear. But then Lulk says, being grateful for pain and suffering seems stupid, but that's what being human is about. Power isn't based on how big you are, it's based on strength of heart. That's what hard work and guts means. Nono is convicted and realizes her mistake in tackling it alone and relying on outward solutions, that she can't do it alone, but needs Lulk's support just as Lulk needs hers. She breaks out of her shell, literally and figuratively, joins her friend who she's called out for and is now equals with, and together they defeat the enemy and save humanity in one of the best final battle sequences I've had the pleasure of seeing. They become one in spirit, in word, in action, and even in animation. The music is triumphant and heartfelt, evoking a sense not of victory but of joyful understanding. They split a black hole in the process, and Nono prepares to sacrifice herself to keep everyone safe. She chats with Lulk about visiting her home on Earth, saying she'll take the singularity that made Nonoriri shine, which I think is referring to her courage, something that she sees in her through Lulk, another normal girl. She doesn't say goodbye, but leaves her a gift in exchange, her own singularity. She is woken up by Cassio, who says, as long as she survives, she'll be happier without her topless ability anyway. But she says that's not it. She says she's glad she had it, because it let her meet Nono. She looks at what's in her hand and sees a paper crane. Nono's wish for her well-being. In summary, this story shows the importance of equality and introspection in a friendship, and how change has to come internally, from our own decisions. In a friendship without equality and self-examination, one side can feel too much pressure while the other side can feel useless, causing resentment in both of them sometimes. But with those qualities, it frees up both sides to feel like they can offer something to each other and that they can depend on one another. When you have that, you can accomplish so much more. Likewise, the decision to change and grow as a person has to be made on your own. But having a real friend who wants you to have that growth is just as important. Friends can help remind each other of how to overcome and change, and also to correct each other when they're making mistakes. A good friendship is a valuable thing for all those involved. Well, that was my video on Gunbuster 2. I hope you enjoyed it and or gained some new insight into this awesome mecha show. Over the course of doing this, I've realized that the theme of friendship is what really makes it memorable for me. It was a lot of fun, and I will definitely be doing more topical videos like this for other series. So thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.